Deadly Delivery, A Valentine's Nightmare. Scary story published by Scare Fiction. Chapter 1, The Setup. I sat in my small, dimly lit living room, the lamplight casting eerie shadows on the walls. Outside, the night was cold and quiet, a stark contrast to the warmth and laughter that filled the air on Valentine's Day. But for me, the holiday served only as a reminder of my solitude, amplifying the emptiness that seemed to pervade every corner of my existence. I wrapped myself tighter in my worn sweater, trying in vain to ward off the chill that seemed to seep into my bones. Loneliness weighed heavily on me, pressing down like a leaden weight, suffocating me with its relentless grip. Lost in my own thoughts, I barely noticed the faint knock at the door, the sound barely registering above the din of my own despair. But when it came again, louder this time, I couldn't ignore it. Rising from my seat, I made my way to the door, heart pounding in my chest with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Standing on my doorstep was a small, nondescript package, wrapped in brown paper and tied with a frayed ribbon. My brow furrowed in confusion as I picked it up, the weight of it feeling strangely heavy in my hands. There was no return address, no indication of who it was from, only my name scrawled hastily across the front in looping script. With trembling fingers, I untied the ribbon and peeled back the paper, revealing what lay within. Nestled inside was a bouquet of blood-red roses, their petals glistening in the soft light of the porch. But as I reached out to touch them, a shiver ran down my body, a sense of unease settling in the pit of my stomach. Who could have sent me such a gift? And why roses, of all things? My mind raced with questions, my thoughts spinning in a whirlwind of confusion and fear. I glanced around the empty street, searching for any sign of the sender, but there was no one in sight, only the cold, empty darkness staring back at me. With a heavy sigh, I closed the door behind me, the weight of the roses still clutched in my hand. I carried them into the living room, setting them down on the coffee table with a sense of trepidation. Something about them felt wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. As the night wore on, I found it increasingly difficult to shake the feeling of unease that had settled over me. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind rattling the windows sent my heart racing, my nerves on edge. And try as I might, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something sinister lurked just beyond the shadows, waiting to pounce. With a sense of dread gnawing at my insides, I curled up on the couch, pulling the blanket tight around my shoulders. But despite my best efforts, sleep eluded me, the darkness pressing in around me like a suffocating blanket. And as the first light of dawn crept through the window, casting long shadows across the room, I knew that my nightmare was only just beginning. Chapter 2, Strange Occurrences. The night stretched on, endless and oppressive, as I sat alone in my darkened living room. Ever since receiving the mysterious bouquet of roses, my once quiet house had become a haven for strange and unsettling occurrences. Objects seemed to move of their own accord, shifting and sliding across the floor when my back was turned. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes that vanished the moment I turned to look at them. And worst of all were the whispers, faint, barely audible, but unmistakably present, lurking just beyond the edge of my consciousness. I tried to dismiss these occurrences as figments of my overactive imagination, the result of sleepless nights and frayed nerves. But deep down, I knew that something was terribly wrong, that there was a darkness lurking within the walls of my home that defied explanation. As I sat in the dim light of the room, my eyes drawn inexorably to the bouquet of roses sitting on the coffee table, I felt a strange panic in my body. There was something unnatural about those flowers, something sinister that I couldn't quite put my finger on. And yet, Despite the unease they inspired, I couldn't bring myself to get rid of them, as if doing so would only invite further malevolence into my life. I tried to distract myself from my mounting paranoia, turning on the television and flipping through the channels in a futile attempt to find something to occupy my thoughts. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being preyed upon by some unseen presence that lingered just beyond the edges of my perception. And then, just as I was beginning to doubt my own sanity, it happened: a loud crash from the kitchen, followed by the sound of shattering glass. My heart leaped into my throat as I leapt to my feet, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I raced towards the source of the disturbance. What I found when I reached the kitchen defied all rational explanation. Every cabinet door stood wide open, their contents strewn haphazardly across the floor. Plates lay shattered, their fragments glinting in the dim light of the room, while pots and pans swung gently from their hooks, as if moved by an invisible hand. I stood frozen in shock, my mind reeling as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. This couldn't be happening. It simply couldn't. And yet, as I surveyed the wreckage before me, I knew with a sickening certainty that this was only the beginning, that whatever dark force had invaded my home was far from finished with me. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone, fingers fumbling, as I dialed the only number I knew would offer me any semblance of comfort in this nightmare. As the line rang on the other end, I prayed silently that whoever picked up would believe me, would understand the danger I was in. But as the call went unanswered, the whispers grew louder, filling the air with their sinister refrain. And in that moment, as fear gripped me in its icy embrace, I knew that I was truly alone, alone with whatever malevolent force had chosen to make my life its playground. Chapter 3: Unexplained Events. With each passing day, the unexplained events in my house escalated, feeding my growing paranoia like fuel to a raging fire. Objects continued to move of their own accord. Strange noises echoed through the empty rooms, and the whispers that had plagued me grew louder, more insistent, until they seemed to fill the very air around me. I tried to rationalize what was happening, to convince myself that there must be some logical explanation for the horrors I was experiencing. Perhaps it was a prank, I thought, the work of some mischievous neighbor seeking to frighten me for their own amusement. Or maybe I was simply suffering from some form of psychosis, my mind unraveling under the weight of my own fears and insecurities. But deep down, I knew that these explanations were nothing more than feeble attempts to deny the truth that something malevolent had taken root in my home, something beyond the realm of rationality or reason. And as each day passed without respite from the relentless onslaught of terror, I felt myself sinking deeper into a mire of despair from which there seemed to be no escape. I tried to reach out for help, to confide in friends and family about the horrors that plagued me, but their responses were always the same: skepticism, disbelief, thinly veiled concern for my mental well-being. No one wanted to believe that such darkness could exist in our world, that the things I described could be anything more than the fevered imaginings of a troubled mind. And so I retreated further into myself, withdrawing from the outside world in a desperate attempt to shield myself from the horrors that surrounded me. But no matter how hard I tried to shut them out, the whispers persisted, their sinister words gnawing at the edges of my sanity like ravenous beasts. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself consumed by a sense of dread unlike anything I had ever known. Each night brought with it new terrors, new manifestations of the darkness that had taken root in my home. And though I tried to hold on to hope, to cling to the belief that there must be some way to banish the evil that plagued me, it felt like an impossible task, a fool's errand in the face of such overwhelming malevolence. And then, just when I thought I could bear no more, when I felt myself teetering on the brink of madness, it happened, a voice clear and distinct, cutting through the cacophony of whispers like a knife through butter. It spoke my name, a single word that sent shivers down my body, and in that moment, I knew that my worst fears had come to pass. For the voice that spoke was not my own, nor was it the voice of any living being I had ever known. It was something otherworldly, something ancient and malevolent, and as it spoke, I felt a cold dread settle in the pit of my stomach. With trembling hands, I reached for the phone, fingers fumbling as I dialed the only number I knew could offer me any hope of salvation. As the line rang on the other end, I prayed silently that whoever picked up would believe me, would understand the danger I was in. But as the call went unanswered, the whispers grew louder, filling the air with their sinister refrain. And in that moment, as fear gripped me in its icy embrace, I knew that I was truly alone with whatever darkness had chosen to make my life its playground. Chapter 4. The nightmare begins. Night after night, my dreams were plagued by the same terrifying vision, a shadowy figure, tall and menacing, its features obscured by darkness, pursuing me relentlessly through a twisted labyrinth of nightmares. Its footsteps echoed ominously in the darkness, each step drawing closer, closer, until I could feel its breath hot on the back of my neck, its presence looming over me like a specter of death. I ran, my heart pounding in my chest, my lungs burning with exertion, but no matter how fast I fled, the figure was always there, just behind me, its presence a suffocating weight that pressed down on me with unbearable force. I tried to scream, to call out for help, but my voice was lost in the void, swallowed up by the darkness that surrounded me. And then, just when I thought I could bear no more, I would awaken with a start, my body drenched in a cold sweat, my heart racing as if I had just narrowly escaped some terrible fate. But even in the safety of my own bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, that the shadowy figure from my dreams lurked just beyond the edge of my vision, waiting for the opportunity to strike. I tried to convince myself that it was just a dream, nothing more than a trick of my overactive imagination. But deep down, I knew that there was something more to it, something darker and more sinister than I could dare to imagine. The figure felt real, too real, its presence seared into my mind like a brand, leaving me haunted by its memory long after I had awoken. As the days turned into weeks, the nightmares only grew worse, each one more vivid and terrifying than the last. I could feel myself slipping further and further into the abyss, my grip on reality growing ever more tenuous as the line between dream and waking blurred into nothingness. And then, one night, as I lay trembling in my bed, the figure from my nightmares appeared before me, its form shifting and twisting in the darkness like smoke. It reached out for me, its fingers curling into claws, and I screamed, a primal sound of terror that echoed through the empty house. But as I recoiled in horror, I felt a strange sense of familiarity wash over me, as if I had known this figure all along, as if it were somehow a part of me. And in that moment, as I stared into its empty eyes, I knew that my nightmare was far from over, that the darkness that had invaded my home had taken root in my very soul. With a gasp, I jolted awake, my body drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. But even as I lay there, trembling and disoriented, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, that the shadowy figure from my dreams was still out there, waiting for the opportunity to strike. And as I lay there in the darkness, alone and afraid, I knew that the nightmare had only just begun. Chapter 5. Investigating the package. Determined to uncover the truth behind the mysterious package that had brought nothing but terror into my life, I set out on a mission to trace its origin. With each step I took, my heart pounded in my chest, anticipation mingling with dread as I ventured deeper into the heart of the unknown. I started by examining the package itself, searching for any clues that might lead me to its sender. But aside from my name, scrawled hastily across the front, there was nothing to indicate where it had come from. No return address, no hint of its origin. Undeterred, I turned to the bouquet of roses that had accompanied the package, hoping that they might hold some clue to their origin. Carefully, I examined each flower, searching for any sign of tampering or manipulation. But they appeared to be nothing more than ordinary roses, their petals soft and fragrant beneath my touch. With a sigh of frustration, I turned my attention to the only other lead I had, the florist from which the package had presumably been sent. Armed with little more than the address printed on the delivery label, I set out in search of the elusive shop, hoping against hope that it might hold the answers I so desperately sought. As I made my way through the narrow streets of the town, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes followed my every move from the shadows. But I pressed on, driven by a determination that bordered on obsession, unwilling to let fear dictate my actions. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of searching, I stumbled upon the address listed on the delivery label, a small, nondescript storefront nestled between two larger buildings. With a sense of trepidation, I pushed open the door and stepped inside, the bell above jingling softly in the stillness of the room. But as I surveyed the interior of the shop, my heart sank like a stone. The shelves were barren, the counters empty, dust coating every surface like a shroud. It was clear that the shop had been closed for years, its former glory faded and forgotten, a relic of a time long past. Despair threatened to overwhelm me as I realized that my search had been in vain, that the answers I sought were as elusive as ever. But even in the face of such overwhelming odds, I refused to give up hope, refusing to let the darkness that had invaded my life consume me completely. With a heavy heart, I turned to leave the shop, the weight of my failure bearing down on me like a leaden cloak. But as I stepped back out into the cold embrace of the night, a glimmer of determination flickered within me, a spark of hope that refused to be extinguished. For I knew that no matter how long the road ahead might be, no matter how insurmountable the obstacles that lay in my path, I would not rest until I had uncovered the truth behind the nightmare that had consumed my life. And with that resolve burning bright within me, I set out once more into the darkness, ready to face whatever horrors awaited me in my quest for answers. Chapter 6. Seeking Help. With nowhere else to turn, and the weight of the unexplained pressing down on me like a leaden cloak, I knew that I had to confide in someone about the horrors that had invaded my life. And so, with a heavy heart and trembling hands, I sought out the one person I trusted above all others, my friend, Mark. As I poured out my tale of terror to him, his brow furrowed in concern, his eyes clouded with skepticism. He listened intently as I recounted the strange occurrences that had plagued me in recent weeks, from the mysterious package to the shadowy figure that haunted my dreams. But when I finished, he shook his head in disbelief, a look of doubt etched across his features. "Jane, are you sure you're not just imagining things?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. "I mean, all of this sounds pretty far-fetched, even for you." But I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes, the uncertainty that belied his words. He wanted to believe me, I could tell, but the rational part of his mind refused to accept the reality of the horrors I described. "I know it sounds crazy, Mark, but I swear to you, it's all true," I insisted, desperation creeping into my voice. "I need your help, please. I can't face this nightmare alone." For a long moment, he was silent, his gaze fixed on mine as if searching for some hidden truth buried within my words. And then, finally, he nodded, a determined glint in his eyes. "Okay, Jane," he said, his voice firm with resolve. "I may not understand what's happening, but I'll do whatever it takes to help you uncover the truth." Relief flooded through me like a tidal wave, washing away the doubts and fears that had threatened to consume me. With Mark by my side, I felt like I could face anything, conquer any obstacle that stood in our way. Together, we set out on a quest to unravel the mysteries that had taken root in my life, scouring the town for any clue that might lead us closer to the truth. We interviewed neighbors and searched old records, turning over every stone in our relentless pursuit of answers. But with each passing day, the darkness seemed to grow stronger, its grip on my life tightening with each new revelation. And though Mark remained steadfast in his determination to help me, I could see the doubt beginning to creep into his eyes, the uncertainty gnawing at his resolve. But even in the face of such overwhelming odds, we refused to give up hope, refused to let the darkness win. For we knew that no matter how bleak the road ahead might seem, as long as we stood together, we would find a way to banish the shadows that threatened to consume us. And with that determination burning bright within us, we pressed on, ready to face whatever horrors awaited us in our quest for truth. Chapter 7: Uncovering Dark Secrets. As Mark and I delved deeper into the history of our town, our search for answers led us down a path lined with darkness and despair. With each new revelation, the shadows that haunted us grew darker, the secrets of the past threatening to engulf us in their malevolent embrace. It was during one late-night research session at the town library that we stumbled upon the first clue to the mystery that had consumed our lives. Buried deep within the archives, hidden beneath layers of dust and neglect, we uncovered a newspaper article detailing a tragic event that had occurred years ago, a Valentine's Day massacre that had left the town reeling in shock and horror. According to the article, the massacre had taken place in a small florist shop on the outskirts of town, owned by a reclusive and eccentric florist named Ezekiel Blackwood. Known for his strange and macabre creations, Blackwood had always been something of an enigma in our town, his presence a source of both fascination and fear. But it wasn't until that fateful Valentine's Day that the true extent of Blackwood's madness was revealed. According to the article, he had gone on a rampage, slaughtering anyone who crossed his path with a savage ferocity that defied all reason. By the time the authorities had arrived on the scene, the shop was a scene of carnage, the air thick with the stench of death and decay. As Mark and I pored over the details of the massacre, a wave of fear ran through my body. A sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. Could it be that the events of that long ago Valentine's Day were somehow connected to the horrors that had invaded my own life? Was it possible that the spirit of Ezekiel Blackwood still lingered, seeking vengeance for the injustices of the past? Determined to uncover the truth, Mark and I continued our investigation, scouring the town for any trace of Blackwood's existence. But the deeper we delved, the more elusive the answers became, slipping through our fingers like smoke in the wind. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, we stumbled upon an old cemetery on the outskirts of town, its weathered headstones standing as silent sentinels to the secrets buried beneath the earth. Among them, we found the final piece of the puzzle, a crumbling tombstone bearing the name Ezekiel Blackwood and the date of his death, February 14, 1932. As we stood before the grave of the man whose madness had left a scar on our town's history, a sense of dread washed over me like a tidal wave, threatening to pull me under. For in that moment, I knew that the nightmare that had consumed my life was far from over, that the spirit of Ezekiel Blackwood still lingered, waiting to unleash its fury upon the unsuspecting souls of our town. With a heavy heart and a sense of impending doom, Mark and I vowed to put an end to the darkness that had plagued us for so long, to confront the horrors of the past and banish them back into the depths from which they had come. And with that solemn oath burning bright within us, we set out once more into the night, ready to face whatever terrors awaited us in our quest for redemption. Chapter 8. Confronting the Past. With trepidation gnawing at our hearts, Mark and I set out to confront the dark specter of the past that had haunted our town for so long. Our destination was the abandoned florist shop, where Ezekiel Blackwood's madness had reached its horrifying climax. The very place where the Valentine's Day massacre had unfolded all those years ago. As we approached the dilapidated building, its windows boarded up and its facade crumbling with neglect, a sense of foreboding washed over me like a tidal wave, threatening to drown me in a sea of dread. But I forced myself to push forward, to steel myself against the horrors that awaited us within. With a trembling hand, I pushed open the creaking door, the musty smell of decay assaulting my senses as we stepped inside. The air was thick with the weight of the past, the shadows dancing in the dim light like specters of long-forgotten memories. We made our way through the cluttered interior of the shop, our footsteps echoing in the empty silence as we searched for any clue that might shed light on the mysteries that had consumed our lives. And then, just as I was beginning to lose hope, I stumbled upon a hidden trapdoor hidden beneath a pile of rotting flower petals. With a sense of trepidation, I pushed open the trapdoor, revealing a staircase that descended into darkness below. Without a word, Mark and I exchanged a glance, a silent agreement passing between us as we prepared to descend into the abyss. As we made our way down the narrow staircase, the darkness closed in around us like a suffocating blanket, the air thick with the scent of decay and despair. But we pressed on, driven by a determination that bordered on madness, unwilling to let fear dictate our actions. And then, just when it seemed like we had descended into the very depths of hell itself, we stumbled upon a hidden chamber hidden deep beneath the earth. The walls were lined with shelves upon shelves of jars, each one containing a grotesque and twisted creation that feared my soul. As we surveyed the contents of the chamber, a sense of horror washed over me like a tidal wave, threatening to overwhelm me with its intensity. For among the jars, we found disturbing clues that linked the past to the present photographs of the victims of the Valentine's Day massacre, their faces frozen in expressions of terror and despair. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I realized that we had stumbled upon the true extent of Ezekiel Blackwood's madness. The depths of his depravity laid bare before us in all its grotesque glory. And as I stared into the empty eyes of the victims that lined the shelves, I knew that we were standing on the brink of a truth too horrifying to comprehend. But even in the face of such overwhelming darkness, Mark and I refused to back down, refused to let the horrors of the past consume us. With grim determination burning bright within us, we vowed to uncover the truth behind the nightmares that had plagued our lives, no matter the cost. And with that solemn oath echoing in the empty silence of the chamber, we pressed on, ready to face whatever terrors awaited us in our quest for redemption. Chapter 9. Battling the Malevolent Force. As the realization dawned upon us that the spirit of Ezekiel Blackwood, the deranged florist whose madness had left a scar on our town's history, was behind the haunting that had consumed our lives, which scared my soul. The darkness that had lurked in the shadows, the whispers that had haunted our dreams, they were all manifestations of Blackwood's malevolent spirit, seeking vengeance from beyond the grave. But even as fear threatened to paralyze us, we knew that we could not afford to falter, not when the lives of everyone in our town hung in the balance. With grim determination burning bright within us, We vowed to find a way to banish the malevolent force that threatened to consume us, to put an end to the nightmare that had plagued our lives for far too long. We searched through ancient tomes and dusty manuscripts, seeking out any shred of knowledge that might aid us in our quest. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, we stumbled upon a passage that spoke of a ritual that could banish even the most powerful of spirits back into the depths from whence they came. With a sense of urgency driving us forward, Mark and I set out to gather the ingredients we would need to perform the ritual. We scoured the town for rare herbs and mystical artifacts, our hearts pounding with anticipation as we raced against time to complete our preparations. And then, finally, the night of the ritual arrived, the air thick with tension as we prepared to confront the darkness that had consumed our lives. With a sense of trepidation, we gathered in the abandoned florist shop, the very place where Ezekiel Blackwood's madness had reached its horrifying climax. As we began to chant the ancient incantations, a sense of power surged through me, coursing through my veins like electricity. I could feel the presence of Blackwood's spirit growing stronger, its malevolent energy pulsating in the air around us like a palpable force. But we refused to be deterred, refused to let fear dictate our actions. With every word of the incantation, we felt the darkness begin to wane, its grip on our reality weakening with each passing moment. And then, just when it seemed like we could bear no more, the darkness shattered like glass, dissipating into the ether with a deafening roar. In its place, a blinding light filled the room, illuminating the darkness with its radiant glow. As the light enveloped us, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a sense of relief that the nightmare was finally over. With a smile of triumph, Mark and I embraced, our hearts filled with gratitude for the victory we had achieved against all odds. But even as we celebrated our triumph, I knew that the darkness would always linger, a reminder of the horrors we had faced and the price we had paid to emerge victorious. And yet, as long as we stood together, as long as we faced the darkness as one, I knew that we would always triumph in the end. Chapter 10: Race Against Time. As Valentine's Day loomed ominously on the horizon, Mark and I found ourselves locked in a desperate race against time to stop the malevolent entity's rampage before it could unleash its fury upon our town once more. With each passing moment, the tension in the air grew thicker, the weight of the impending doom pressing down on us like a suffocating blanket. We knew that we faced increasingly dangerous obstacles in our quest to confront the entity, obstacles that tested not only our physical strength, but also our resolve and courage. But we refused to back down, refused to let fear dictate our actions as we prepared to confront the darkness that threatened to consume us all. Our journey took us through the darkest corners of our town, through abandoned buildings and forgotten alleyways where the shadows lurked, waiting to ensnare us in their malevolent embrace. With every step we took, the whispers grew louder, their sinister words echoing in the empty silence of the night. But we pressed on, our determination unwavering as we faced each new challenge head-on. We fought against twisted creatures that seemed to materialize out of thin air, their grotesque forms twisting and contorting in the darkness as they sought to thwart our progress. And yet, despite the danger that lurked around every corner, we refused to let fear paralyze us, drawing strength from the bond that united us in our quest for redemption. With each victory we achieved, the darkness grew weaker, its grip on our reality loosening with every blow we struck. But as Valentine's Day drew ever closer, the obstacles we faced grew more insurmountable. The entity's power reaching its peak, as it prepared to unleash its fury upon the unsuspecting souls of our town. And in the face of such overwhelming odds, I found myself confronting my deepest fears, doubts creeping into my mind like tendrils of darkness. But Mark stood by my side, his unwavering faith in our ability to overcome the darkness serving as a beacon of hope in the sea of uncertainty that surrounded us. With his encouragement, I found the strength to face my fears head-on, to confront the darkness that threatened to consume me and emerge victorious. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, we stumbled upon the entity's lair, a twisted labyrinth of shadows and nightmares that seemed to stretch on into infinity. With grim determination, we pressed forward, our hearts pounding in our chests as we prepared to face the final battle. As we stepped into the heart of the darkness, a sense of calm washed over me, a realization dawning that we had finally reached the end of our journey. With every step we took, the darkness retreated, its power waning in the face of our unwavering resolve. And then, with a final cry of triumph, we banished the entity back into the depths from whence it came, the darkness dissipating like smoke in the wind. As we emerged from the shadows into the light of a new day, I knew that we had emerged victorious, our bond stronger than ever in the face of adversity. And as Valentine's Day dawned upon our town once more, I knew that the darkness that had once threatened to consume us had been vanquished, its hold on our reality broken forever. And though the scars of our ordeal would linger, serving as a reminder of the horrors we had faced, I knew that, as long as we stood together, we would always triumph in the end. Chapter 11. Final Showdown. As the final moments before the showdown approached, a palpable sense of anticipation hung heavy in the air. Mark and I stood at the threshold of the abandoned florist shop, our hearts pounding in our chests as we prepared to confront the spirit of the deranged florist, Ezekiel Blackwood, in a battle that would determine the fate of our town. With each passing second, the tension in the air grew thicker, the weight of the impending confrontation pressing down on us like a suffocating blanket. But we refused to let fear paralyze us, drawing strength from the bond that united us in our quest to banish the darkness that threatened to consume us all. With grim determination, we pushed open the creaking door of the shop and stepped inside, the musty smell of decay assaulting our senses as we entered the darkness within. The air was thick with the scent of roses, the same scent that had accompanied the mysterious package that had heralded the beginning of our nightmare. As we made our way through the cluttered interior of the shop, our footsteps echoed in the empty silence, which scared my soul. I could sense the presence of the entity lurking in the shadows, its malevolent energy pulsating in the air around us like a tangible force. But we pressed on, our resolve unwavering as we prepared to face our greatest challenge yet. And then, just when it seemed like we could bear no more, the darkness coalesced before us, taking on the form of the deranged florist whose madness had left a scar on our town's history. With a roar that echoed through the empty silence of the shop, Blackwood lunged at us, his eyes burning with a fierce intensity that sent shivers down my body. But we stood our ground, our determination unwavering as we prepared to confront the darkness that threatened to consume us. With every blow we struck, the darkness retreated, its grip on our reality weakening with each passing moment. But Blackwood fought with a ferocity that defied all reason, his twisted form twisting and contorting in the darkness as he sought to thwart our progress. But we refused to be deterred, refused to let fear dictate our actions as we fought tooth and nail to banish the entity back into the darkness from whence it came. With every ounce of strength and courage we possessed, we pushed back against the darkness, our determination unwavering as we fought for the very survival of our town. And then, Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, we landed the final blow, a blow that sent Blackwood reeling back into the shadows from whence he came. With a deafening roar, the darkness shattered like glass, dissipating into the ether with a blinding flash of light. As we emerged from the shadows into the light of a new day, I knew that we had emerged victorious, our bond stronger than ever in the face of adversity. And though the scars of our ordeal would linger, serving as a reminder of the horrors we had faced, I knew that as long as we stood together, we would always triumph in the end. Chapter 12. Closure. Despite our victory over the malevolent force that had once threatened to consume our lives, Mark and I found ourselves haunted by the events that had transpired. The memories of the horrors we had faced lingered in the shadows of our minds, casting a pall over our spirits that refused to be shaken. As we stood together in the aftermath of our ordeal, seeking solace in each other's company, I could see the toll that our shared experience had taken on us both. The lines of exhaustion etched deep into Mark's face, his eyes weary and haunted by the darkness that had once threatened to consume us. But even in the face of such overwhelming despair, we found strength in our bond, drawing comfort from the knowledge that we had faced the darkness together and emerged victorious. With each passing moment, the weight of our shared experience grew lighter, the burden of our past finally beginning to lift from our shoulders. And then, as the dawn broke over the horizon, casting its golden light upon the world below, we made a decision to leave the small town behind and start fresh in a new place where the memories of the past couldn't reach us. With a sense of determination burning bright within us, we packed our belongings and set out on the open road, leaving the horrors of our past behind us once and for all. As we drove away from the town that had been our home for so long, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a feeling of freedom that I had thought lost forever. And as I cast one last glance over my shoulder, bidding farewell to the horrors that once plagued our lives, I knew that we were finally free to embrace the future that lay ahead, free to build a new life together in a world untainted by the darkness of our past. And though the road ahead may be long and uncertain, I knew that as long as we stood together, as long as we faced the challenges of the future as one, we would always triumph in the end. With Mark by my side, I knew that anything was possible, even finding peace in the aftermath of the darkest chapter of our lives.